This is the new Elegoo Centauri Carbon 2, the kind of surprise sequel to the Elegoo Centauri Carbon 1. Let's go. So if you want to know the TLDR on this machine, it's basically this. Just like the Centauri Carbon that went before it, this machine hits a price point that puts it as an insanely affordable but relatively reliable workhorse that for the vast majority of users will not disappoint. And like the CC1, its firmware has been released with some rough edges, it's not without some compromises, but again, for this price point, those are so easily overlooked. If your budget doesn't stretch beyond, say, £500 or dollars, then this is probably the best printer you can buy right now. But if your budget does stretch up to, say, $1,000, then you have a lot of other options that you should consider. We'll go into those at the end. This machine was provided by Elegoo at no cost. This video is not sponsored, although there are future agreements with Elegoo for sponsored content. If you're here because you're considering buying the Elegoo Centauri Carbon 2, then as usual, the affiliate code in the description does help me out, so please use it. Now, with that out of the way, let's dive into the details. To put it bluntly, this machine is a more than competent offering at its price point. While Elegoo still maintain that they're releasing the colour kit for the CC1, and I happen to believe them. Side note, I do expect to show you it in a future video, although at the moment I don't actually know anything about it. I don't even know if it's going to look like the one on the CC2, if it's going to share the name, don't know the price. But anyway, this machine, the CC2, is out of the box a reasonable jump in functionality over the CC1, both in terms of the multicolour, but also it's an upgrade in other ways too. Currently in the UK it's sold at about £399-ish, or less if it's on offer. And that does land more expensive than the original Centauri Carbon, and that's hardly surprising. And as much as the following statement might annoy people on an emotional level, the hard fact is until we know how much time, money and effort is involved in the CC1 colour upgrade and how it compares to CC2 as it comes out of the box, the CC2 does remain an attractive way to turn your CC1 into two printers, one of which will be a sort of single colour workhorse, and the other one will be a potentially multicolour machine. Ultimately, which is going to be the better choice is going to be something that becomes clearer when we have more details on the aforementioned, and hopefully that won't be too far away. So what is new with the CC2? Let's go through it. This vent at the back looks different. That's because on the CC2 they've added some neat functionality. This seems to be fully automated in the slicer depending on which filament you choose. We have seen this before on more premium machines like the H2D and the Core 1L, which has a sort of more manual method of doing it, but same net effect. Again, I'll say price point a lot in this video. This is very surprising to have this at this price point. It probably will become more standard across all machines, as these things tend to. Thanks to the new canvas system, the previously mildly annoying but standard loading process on the CC1, which was pretty much the same as any other Core XY printer, is gone now too. We'll cover canvas a bit more in its own section, but one of the benefits is that like the Snapmaker U1, and I hope this becomes more standard across all printers, you have an auto-loading process now. The CC2 maxes out at 110 degrees C bed and 350 degrees nozzle, which is quite high. Just enough to get into, for example, PPA-CF territory, which is something I'm going to be doing soon. There is, however, no chamber heater, which is ideal for PPA-CF, but in theory something like the Big Tree Tech Panda Breath, yes, that's a real name of a product, that should fit in this machine for around £90, and this ultimately means that for well under £500 you can get a multi-material heated chamber printer, which is then fully capable of serious engineering filaments, in theory. I've already printed a ton of PA6GF and some ABS on this machine for the last video, and likewise the CC1, I had printed TPU, PC, polypropylene, fine. You do need to get the right bed surface for polypropylene, but all these worked fine, and they probably will on this machine too. And I say it again, at this price, it is a legitimate home engineering workhorse, and that also makes it potentially a compelling entry point for a small print farm, if that's your thing. On a repairability note, other than the fact all modern machines use bespoke parts now, and the Elegoo Centauri Carbon range doesn't use standard clipper, the OS has just in the last few days been released as open source on GitHub, so if you are interested in seeing that, I'll link it in the description. It's also worth mentioning that Elegoo are the same Elegoo who, last year-ish, proposed an open RFID protocol that's for the filaments. As far as I can see, and I'm not very knowledgeable on RFID protocols. What this means in practice is that you should be able to buy your own RFID tags and stick them on your filament, or you could even make some swatches that you could hold up to the machine to load, say, PLA or PETG with your own profiles. That is actually really cool, and that's something I'm probably going to look at when I get some time. Officially, on the Elegoo website, the Centauri Carbon 2 boasts 31 sensors. That sounds like a lot of sensors. I'm going to refrain from counting them all because I'm not really even sure where they all are, or indeed what they count as a sensor. But there is one that matters to me a lot that, again, you don't often see at this price point, let alone working properly, and that is filament block detection. This seems to work really well. If the printer detects a block, it will pause gracefully. At the other end too, if your filament won't feed from a tangle or jam on the reel, again, it can easily detect it, and it will stop. In fact, it seems to detect just about everything that goes wrong on the feed line, including, say, colour change errors, and it will fail fairly gracefully in all cases that I've come across. Multicolour is obviously the headline feature on this machine, and this hardware configuration is also my favourite implementation of the single nozzle multi-input system so far. That was quite a sentence to read out. The main reason why is that it's merging the filament lines right at the tool head. The closer you have the merge point where the filament goes down to one path, the less retraction you need on a colour change, which in this case is very close to the tool head. This means faster, more reliable swaps and no need to re-spool, or very minimal. You just have a passive spring on the reels. That's exactly what the canvas does, and if you're thinking that's exactly what a Bamboo A-series does, yes, you're correct. It's exactly the same thing. One thing to watch though, and I speak from experience, embarrassingly, make sure your reels are loaded in the right order. I got mine backwards, and it's not immediately obvious when it happens because of the very small retractions, so it kind of just makes the reel look a bit messy. It doesn't seem to fail. And as a footnote, I can't really blame the instructions either. They did say several times to get these in the right order, and I just didn't. Surprisingly, the canvas system can handle TPU directly and other flexible filaments, which opens up some interesting possibilities, but it also opens up some interesting new challenges, to put it mildly, that we've not really seen in single nozzle multi-input printers before. And this is some consequence of the hardware setup rather than the printer itself. So the only reason we haven't seen this before is because previous printers with this kind of hardware setup have not allowed TPU and haven't worked with TPU at all. The problem, in short, is that the ideal flush temperature for some filaments like TPU is around 250 degrees C to get it out the nozzle, which is also the ideal temperature for PLA to be sat still for not very long and heat creep and block the nozzle. TPU and PETG is probably a safer combination. I'll be testing that out soon. I've actually asked Elegoo to send me some more nozzles because the risk of testing this a lot is that you might block the nozzles. I'll share profiles when I've got all this dialed in, but for now, if you want to experiment with mixed materials, if you have this printer, then have spare nozzles ready and be prepared to dig into the tool change macros because you'll probably have to do something there as well. But I am generally quite optimistic that this will be possible. I think that it's a settings issue, not a hardware issue. We have seen previously that some printers are significantly better than others at printing miniatures specifically, and it's definitely related to price, or that's what I found. But the CC2 seems to buck that trend with its output rivaling some of the neatest multicolour FDM machines on the market, and bear in mind that I don't yet have a 0.2 nozzle, so these are all printed on 0.4. I have done some editing to the settings of the profiles, but I haven't hugely tuned them. There's some cleanup for the usual stringing. You'd definitely not be disappointed with any of these. That's actually quite impressive. 4 colours is normally the hard limit on close loaded systems like this, and I think I just made that terminology up, but I may well have found a workaround to use more colours. While a reel is not active, you can just swap it out mid-print, and potentially without even pausing. The system fully detaches unused filament reels, so it doesn't really care that a reel is changed. The obvious use case for something like this is HueForge, where you often need to use more than 4 colours, but you only change each colour once. It's almost certainly not an intended feature of the printer, so it could be wiped out by future firmware. I find that unlikely though, and it currently works on the firmware that I've got installed, which is the latest one. So the Elegoo Centauri Carbon 2 delivers on its promises. It has some minor rough edges, yes, and I promise that this is the last time that I say it. When it's viewed through the lens of the price, it punches well above its weight in a category that's getting increasingly crowded. It prints everything that you'd expect and then some more. And as such, just like the CC1 before it, I find myself recommending it. But if your budget does stretch further, then I would definitely be considering a tool changer because of the increased flexibility that those offer. So that's definitely worth a look, but they are significantly more expensive. And if you already have a tool changer and you want another cheaper workhorse, then it fits there too. If you already have one of these machines, and they are apparently out there in the wild now, then let me know how it's going in the comments. I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.